fields of Clarington, everyone, the show where the land speaks and we listen. In our first episode, we journeyed through the past, present, and future of Clarington's farming landscape. But today, we are shifting gears from rolling fields to the world of smart sensors and intelligent robots. This episode is all about innovation and how farming is not just surviving, it's evolving. Today's guest is someone who's not just thinking about the future of farming, he's actively building it. Joining us is Nicholas Varas, the co founder and CEO of Moduleaf, a trailblazing agri-tech company based right here in Durham Region. With a powerful combination of indoor farming, robotics, and machine learning, Moduleaf is tackling the global food crisis by creating efficient year-round growing environments. Their autonomous robots don't just monitor crops, they analyze them in real time, harvest them, and even offer data-driven insights to help farmers stay ahead of the curve. From Durham region to the global stage, Nicholas is proving that future of farming isn't just high-tech. It's local, scalable, and incredibly exciting. Welcome to the episode, Nicholas. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Nicholas. It is a pleasure to have you here today. And to start things off, can you tell us a bit about your background, as in where you are from? What led to the exploration of the intersection of farming and technology, as in how did it all started?
Yeah, it's a question that I get all the time. And I guess where it all started was my final year of engineering at Ontario Tech, right in here in Durham. And for the previous summer before our final year, my friends and I were trying to propose a custom project to do for our capstone project. And we were stumbling around the idea of something to do with gardening, because we're all passionate about gardening. We originally thought we wanted to make a food 3D printer, so one that would, draw on a screen. You'd have a custom shape for a cookie or something, and would 3D print a cookie for you. So that's still in the back burner, but we felt like we couldn't do that in 8 months. So what we stumbled upon instead was a robot that would monitor leafy greens grown on a vertical farming platform. So we had a robot that would travel on the face of a shelf and use a telescoping arm with a camera to monitor crops, see if we were doing basil at the time because it grew very quickly. So, after 8 months and 12 kilograms of basil, we were getting a little sick of the plant. But the idea of the robot was to monitor plants for diseases and anything and alert the operators ahead of time so that they could deal with the problems on the farm. So after that project, we actually immediately got involved in the Weston Family Foundation's Homegrown Innovation Challenge, which was a Canadian challenge focused on producing berries year-round in a Canadian climate at a competitive market cost for consumers. So we were lucky enough to get on the Ontario Tech team, which comprised Ontario Tech University, Moduleaf, as well as one other company, Turnkey Aquaponics. So we were tackling the automation and robotics side of the project, whereas Turnkey was focused on the energy infrastructure, and the university was here to support us on more of the entrepreneurship side of the project. So that project actually ended the end of December of last year, 2024. So we're done with that phase of that project, and now we're working on additional projects with some other business partners in the next coming months.
That's interesting and sounds really fun work. In that whole challenge stuff, how did the idea of Moduleaf came? And where does it came from? Was there any specific moment, challenge, or any experience that sparked this idea? Okay, now I want to build a company. How did this all came to life?
Yeah, I think originally, because we all came from a technical background, we never really thought we would get into the business side of things. But in that that semester before our final year, we did get involved in the Brilliant Catalyst program. So we were accepted for a new cohort where we learned the business fundamentals and actually founded the company while we were in the summer before. So before we even got into that final year when we started building the robots, we had started to develop the foundations for a business. And then once the semester, started and we started getting the robot together, it all just kind of accelerated from there.
And what about the name of the company? As in, what does Moduleaf means and it represents? Because it's been really intruding for me since I have heard about your company at the agricultural summit. I've been thinking about what does this means.
Yeah, so the name Moduleaf came from our passion towards developing modular robotics. And the leaf kind of just, you throw in the leaf to tie it to agriculture. But the idea behind this kind of compound word was that our robots would be modular platforms where we can do multifunctional deployment on a farming environment. So, for example, the robot we're developing now has elevators that you can mount to the side of the robot. So you can switch out components or attachments. So if you want to have robot arms mounted to the side, then you can do that. If you want to have light bars for UV disease treatment on the side, then you can do that. If you just want to have sensor rigs or fixed materials set to the edge of the robot, you can do that. But the idea was that we'd be creating kind of a universal base that would allow farmers to do whatever they want to do on a farm, all on the same platform, and keep it cost efficient for them to do so. So that's exactly kind of where the whole modular part of Moduleaf came from. Yeah.
That's really thoughtful, and now I know what Moduleaf means. So, thank you so much for explaining it to me. You have been working with robotics, AI, and controlled environments, some very big high tech concepts. But for someone like me who's not familiar with these concepts, can you please explain what Moduleaf actually does in a way that any farmer or listener can easily understand?
Yeah, so when it comes to our integrations with artificial intelligence or machine learning, the two biggest things that we look at is kind of growth stages of the crops, as well as diseases and other things that are present in the environment. So in short, what machine learning really is it's kind of statistics. So the robot will take lots of images or videos of the farming environment, and what it'll do is it will compare these images to a data set that might have 10,000 images, 100,000 images of what a good strawberry looks like, what a flowering strawberry looks like, what a diseased strawberry looks like. And it'll use that data and statistics to come up with an outcome. And then that's what the robot identifies as, ripe or unripe. In a way, AI is just data-driven decision making, but by a machine. It tends to be a big buzzword that's thrown out a lot in the tech industry, AI this, AI that. What it's really saying is we have a computer. The computer is looking at data, whether it be images, whether it be sounds, whether it be text, and then it's using that to make decisions based on what it sees now or what it hears now. So in terms of what Moduleaf does is we're applying more of the image-based data sets to make these decisions in a farming environment. So again, if it was, for example, strawberries, we would be comparing it to tons and tons of images that we have of strawberries and then using that to make informed decisions. Obviously, when you start out with these data sets, you have to make sure that they're actually accurate. So, the very first initial data sets would likely be someone who is manually labeling all of these images and uploading them to a data set. But the good thing is, as the machine starts to go through the environments and you build up your data sets, it gets a little bit more and more accurate with every new photo that's added. Eventually, the machine is confident enough that it can take over and start auto-labeling new data. So, you don't have someone there for hours on end. Just, yes, this is a strawberry. Yes, this is a strawberry. And this can be applied to different crops. So, we're starting with strawberries because that's what our grant was focused on. But the same thing is applied to leafy greens. The same thing is applied to soybeans or apples or oranges and stuff like that. It just might be different things you're looking for in the image. So in a simple way, that's kind of how machine learning works, especially in an agriculture setting.
Now I understand what it does and how it does. Like now the concepts are much clearer than they were before. Thank you so much for the explanation again. Moduleaf has its roots in Durham region. Why was it important for you to build and grow your company here? What does the local community means to you as an innovator?
Yeah, I would say originally we started here because, the funding and opportunity was here. But as we came to grow larger, the support from the community just poured in all directions. We had incubators from Whitby. We had incubators from other Durham regions that were really interested in helping us grow our company. And this was even just, providing opportunities to speak to people, to pitch to people, to meet business investors and mentors who are giving their own time, not charging us for their expertise to kind of foster this creation of our business. So as we came to grow, we really came to respect the Durham region and what they were providing to us. So now, in thanks, we're trying to provide back to our community. On top of that, Durham is huge for farming. Agriculture is very, very popular. So we're trying to tie into, the roots that we've already established in the Durham region in terms of agriculture. Specifically, Clarington is very big on apple farms and other farms. So we thought, we're already based out of Durham. There's probably no other better place to start a agri-tech business because we have all the support locally here and we can actually make an impact in our own community.
That is actually so true that our community is so supportive of anybody who's trying to do something new and something creative. And that support encourages the person to do more for the community. And that's honestly best. So, thank you so much, guys out there who are supporting people like us. Every startup hits bumps. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced early on, and how did you push through them?
I think for me personally, a big thing was since I come from a technical background, I basically had no idea how to run a business. So we incorporated the business, great. We had some support to kind of facilitate that process. But after that, I had no idea how to do business taxes. I didn't know how to do accounting. Like, this is all stuff that I've learned on the fly, just doing. So for me, that was a really big learning curve because you can kind of picture how you would run a business in your mind, but when it actually comes to the legality and, tax processes and remitting to the CRA and making sure that they don't come banging on your door because you haven't given them what they need was a really big learning curve for me. In terms of a business, the biggest thing is just funding. When you're a startup, it's really hard to get access to funds. For example, grants typically want businesses that have been around for a couple of years before they, just hand out money to people. So a lot of these grants that we were looking at, it's like, oh, great, this applies to us, but we have to be in business for 3 years. It's like, okay, well, how do we be in business for 3 years if we don't have any money? And how do we apply for money if we don't? So it's just like this big cycle. So because of that, we were very lucky to get involved in the Weston Challenge because that gave us immediate access to some funds that got us off the ground. A lot of companies don't have that ability. And I think getting to that first sale or getting to that first opportunity to get money is really where a lot of businesses struggle. Now that challenge has ended, we're kind of going back into that area. We're not necessarily starting from the bottom, but we need to be conscious of how we're applying for more funds without necessarily going directly to investors and giving away equity of the company. So we're just being very strategic on how to spend our money, but it's a bummer because I wish I could say, oh yes, give us $200,000 and we'll go, and I'll hire 3 people and we'll get this done in 8 months. Unfortunately, just not how it works realistically, as much as I'd like to just hire 10 people and then innovate as fast as possible. So I think for us, the biggest roadblock is definitely being mindful of how we meet new clients, how we kind of create projects without burning our entire runway of cash as a startup.
And that is important too, right? Because you are doing a business and you need money to run that business. So, all in all, it makes sense. When you think about the impact you want Moduleaf to have, not just in Durham but globally, what's the bigger picture? What kind of change do you hope to be part of?
The biggest thing for me is that we rely a lot on other countries to produce our food, which is not great, especially when you're in a trade war. So, the orange man down south, to be polite as possible, has created a situation which is not just hard on Canadians, but Americans as well, and as what the rest of the world. But it's kind of given Canada a wake-up call saying, hey, we've relied on the States for so long to provide a lot of our food, a lot of our other resources. And we're only realizing now that we really need to diversify. And part of that is starting to produce our own food on a large scale. And the problem like that is, you can hop right into building a 100,000 square foot vertical farm if you want to start producing leafy greens. But there are also challenges with our climate compared to the States. So for example, a lot of the greenhouses that we've established in Canada are California style greenhouses, the glass greenhouses that really thrive in the summer months, but in the winter they're not so efficient. So what we're trying to do is diversify from what we've normally done in this industry and work towards producing year-round production facilities that we can just drop into communities across Canada. So let's say we have this energy efficient thermal greenhouse that lasts the whole winter month for production in Canada, especially in the colder winter months. And what we'll do is we'll say, hey, Durham region has its own food facility, York region has its own food facility. And now we're really just breaking down that supply chain and actually giving access to communities all this fresh produce, which not only, solves the issue of fighting against imports, transportation costs and such like that. But we're actually giving communities access to fresh, healthy food that isn't grown with pesticides and harmful chemicals, and is ultimately much better for the environment that way. But the long-term picture is that we can establish these year-round growing facilities across Canada and eventually the world, should we choose to globalize like that, and really, really break away from our reliance on other countries, because I think that's really what we need right now as a country.
That's a great thinking and a great initiative that you have taken on to your shoulders. And I hope you succeed in this, because just today in the morning I was talking to one of the farmer for our episode, and we were discussing the same issue, and I said the same thing, that I don't understand why we go out to buy things when we have everything here, and it is just weird to me. However, that's a very long conversation to have. Moving next, let's dive into the heart of what Moduleaf actually does and how it works on a day-to-day level. From robots to real-time data, there's a lot to explore here. Let's start with the virtual tour. Walk us through what a typical Moduleaf equipped indoor farm looks like. What are the robots doing? And what role does the grower play in all of this?
Previous projects we did was with the first robot we built was specifically looking at harvesting and monitoring strawberries. So typically what it would do is it would drive up and down the rows of a greenhouse or a polytunnel farm, which is like an open-ended covered greenhouse. And it would take pictures of the plants and it would check, is this a flowering strawberry? Is this a ripe strawberry? Is this one ready to be picked? Or is this one overripe, damaged? So it would take the statistics of those as it drove by. And when they were actually ready for harvesting, it would use the robotic arm and pick the strawberries. So that was our very first project that we did. And that was with a local farmer in the Durham region. And where we're kind of going now is we are developing a new robot type, like I mentioned, that's kind of focused more on the modularity with the elevators or swappable components on the space. So we haven't deployed that in a farming environment yet, but we're hoping to, by the end of the summer, start getting that customer feedback and seeing just as many applications as we can do with this one platform. But on the facility side of things, we're hoping to also start building containerized versions of like a modified vertical farming system. So we'd hope to do this in a hybrid greenhouse, so we're still capturing the natural light. So we rely less on artificial light for growing plants, which is a big energy cost for indoor farms. But we're hoping to deploy several versions of these modular indoor farms that can scale anywhere from 2,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet. So right now, our kind of day-to-day operations is just planning for our next phase of deployment for the robot, but also working on our business partners' designs for this greenhouse environment. So we're hoping to do a couple projects in the next 6 months or so, and then we'll really start to get an idea of how scalable these facilities are, what the runtime optimizations that we can make, and really see the profitability of these facilities. Because a really big thing with vertical farming is if you don't offset the cost of your energy, of your labor, these facilities aren't very profitable. So I actually did a TEDx talk on this in 2024, talking about these large vertical farming companies, specifically in the States. So App Harvest, Fifth Season, those kind of companies were having these giant facilities with tons of millions of dollars invested in them by Silicon Valley and other investors. But the problem was it looked all great on paper, but these facilities weren't actually profitable. They were just soaking up cash. And once the investor funds ran out, we realized there's a really big problem with vertical farming, and especially if you're not developing smart designs that are really capturing as much like advantage from the energy devices that you have, you really can't run a profitable facility. So it's very, very common that vertical farming companies will fail because their just facilities aren't profitable. So we've seen these failures, and we focused our efforts on really solving where the downfalls of those other companies came in. And a lot of it was based on underlooked properties, such as proper airflow, for example. With a traditional vertical farm, you have these big fans that are blowing air all around the facility. And then what it's doing is just creating a big turbulent mess that's not super efficient for the plants. And it doesn't really help when you have a disease outbreak in one of your facilities. So what we're trying to do is focus on a system that's delivering air in a much more streamlined manner directly at the roots of the plants, and then recapturing that air into the HVAC system. So rather than having this big loss across the whole facility as a whole, we're trying to be much more strategic with the way that we deploy this energy, both with lighting and with HVAC and airflow. So what our day-to-day operations mainly look like is actually just diving right into those optimizations and getting ready to scale or deploy and scale a new facility that will hopefully solve these pitfalls that we see in other companies in this space.
That's a lot of information, and I think about the profitability thing, I think it's kind of hard anyways to make profit in this field, right?
Yeah, especially, yeah, profitability is a really big issue in vertical farming. With indoor farming in general, it's been pretty profitable. So you can grow plants either in soil, you can grow it in water, which is called hydroponics. You can grow it where it's integrated with fish systems. It's called aquaponics. So typically in those systems, you have tanks of fish. So as you grow the fish, they develop waste. The waste kind of goes to the planters, and the plants will just extract the nitrates out of the fish waste, and then the filtered water goes back to the fish. So it creates kind of like a closed loop sustainable cycle that way. It's not as popular as typical hydroponics because you have to maintain fish in other parts of the system. There's more failure points, but there's a lot of different approaches that people have taken a look at. But you can still build an indoor farm at a single level and be very profitable. We see a lot of farmers using what's called the drip irrigation system. So even if they have like trays of soil-based or cocoa peat plants, they just have lines of water that slowly drip water onto the plants. And what this does is it allows them to use significantly less water, but still grow very fruitful and tasty plants. So we see a lot of farmers having success with that. It's just when we start moving into the realm of vertical farming where you have really high density crops and having to use a lot of supplemented light, that's when we're really seeing the challenges in justifying the costs.
You offer autonomous monitoring and harvest. What's the biggest advantage of automating these tasks for farmers, especially when it comes to saving time, improving accuracy, or even like reducing waste?
You touched on a couple points there. Improving accuracy, as these robots get smarter and smarter over time, they'll be very quick at identifying exactly what needs to be harvested. And in terms of reducing waste, if the robot is more certain that it's picking a ripe strawberry, for example, we don't have to worry about, you pick it and then, oh, it's still unripe on one side, and now we have to waste the strawberry. Luckily, we have a business partner that's working on a biodigester, so we're able to actually feed organic waste to the biodigester, and it produces a gas that's burned and creates energy. But so we can still luckily recycle wasted fruit and other organic matter. But I think the main advantage is that, especially in Canada, we're having challenges with foreign worker policies, but also just having labor that's affordable on farming like environments. A lot of farmers are relying on foreign labor, high school students, and basically cheaper labor to maintain these farms. And the government supports our farmers to kind of allow them to do stuff like this, but we're getting into a point where it's very hard for farmers to have the help that they need to harvest these crops because it just becomes a very big cost to them. So the advantage with robotics is, you can run them on longer cycles. You can have them work 24 hours a day, but you're not paying nearly as high of a salary to these robots. You might be even just renting them for the summer months that you're growing, then you can return them and you don't have to worry about storage or maintaining them during the winter months. So I think what we're trying to do is, and specifically in the world of indoor farming, is when you have indoor farming, your two largest costs are labor and energy. We're really trying to tackle the labor side of things, whereas our partners are tackling the energy side of things. So overall, we're trying to fight those two largest costs associated with indoor farming to really make it as friendly and economical to farmers as possible.
That's great. And the labor issue is actually a big thing because I was having this conversation, as I said, in the morning with the farmer, and she was telling me that as they're planning to retire, it's getting hard for them to get a full-time person hired to do the field work.
Yeah, and you touched on a point there, which is the knowledge gap. As farmers retire, we don't have people to fill their shoes, and now we have this really, really big gap of knowledge where now no one wants to do the job because they have no idea how to do it. And not only that, they see the challenges that farmers are having with the changing climate conditions. So now farmers are having to worry about crop cycles. If you plant your strawberries too early and a frost comes over and kills all your plants, now that's just a big cost sink for replanting. And what happens is farmers kind of get into debt more and more and more, and it just accumulates. So most younger people, they see that and they're like, well, I don't want to do that. It's not going to make me any money, especially with the current economy. And, people are struggling to afford homes, and farming really just isn't on their the forefront of their mind, because it's hard for most people to look at it and try to see a profitable industry. But yet here it is. It's the most important industry we have in our country. So I agree, like it's hard to find good talent, but also people that are just interested in the industry as well. So that's where we really have to kind of bring that interest back. Part of what we're trying to do is do that through robotics, and in getting the students that might be interested in STEM kind of see the other side of the picture. How can we apply these robots? It's not just manufacturing that you'd see them. Maybe, again, in agriculture, maybe in wastewater treatment. There's a lot of these dirty jobs that most people don't want to do, but you can kind of give a new light to what really has potential in this industry.
What kind of insights do farmers get from the system, and how does that data help them make better decision? I know we did talked about the kind of insights, but could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that plays into it. So part of it is, for example, the ripeness detection, the growth stage detection. We're able to start planning based on what the robot sees. We can actually count the strawberries that are ripe. We can measure the strawberries that are ripe and actually predict the yields for farmers. And this would be available to them through a dashboard that they could view at any time. Let's say we break the greenhouse into zones, and we say zone 1 has 300 strawberries that are ready to be picked. This will generate you X kilograms of strawberries for this amount of money that you can sell them. We've noticed that there's these strawberries that are not quite ripe yet. They're still unripe, but maybe in a week or so, they'll be ready to be picked. And then that will give you this much money. So what we're able to do is use this data to predict the yield patterns of the farm, to alert farmers of any defects ahead of time so that they're able to solve this problem before it grows into a much bigger issue. A lot of the data that we get is to really help the farmers understand what's going on their farm, how it's performing, and what kind of revenues they can see from it.
From a user standpoint, is this something that requires heavy tech, or is it designed in a way that is easier for a farmer who might not come from a tech background to use?
Part of our ideas is that, or philosophy is that, we don't want it to be super high tech where no one can use it. What we're trying to do is make it very friendly for anybody to use, and that it becomes more of a tool and less of a liability. So for example, what we see a lot in Canada and just the farming industry in general is people might buy a $120,000 tractor from Germany or from China. And what they find is once it comes here, great, it's nice and shiny, but they have no support for it. They don't understand if something breaks, how do they fix it, right? So what we're really struggling with is, the support from companies helping out their clients. So that's something we really, really want to focus on, is actually having that relationship with the farmer. We're saying, hey, we're going to make it as easy for you as possible to operate. If you ever have any problems, we have that support that can give you that confidence in operating this technology. But the idea is that we don't make the tech a prohibiting factor of using it, because then we're just in the same boat as all of these other companies. So user friendliness is definitely something that we focus on.
You have partnered with universities and foundations on projects like Brilliant Farm, and I know we did talk a bit about this in the beginning, but what role does collaboration played in your development process, and what kind of opportunities does that open for you?
The new greenhouse projects that we're working on was a direct result of a collaboration with another company, Agricultura. So what they focus on is that vertical farming platforms with the airflow technology. They've all patented that. That's been commercialized. And what that allows us to do is start working on new technologies together, rather than Moduleaf inventing their own form of the technology and having to compete with them in the same industry. So what we saw instead was more of a beneficial partnership. We're saying, hey, you have this system that's commercialized, but you don't have any automation in it. We can fill that gap, and then together we can build a system that's significantly more strong than anything we've seen on the market. So I think with our collaborations, we've been very strategic with partnering with companies that have filling our gaps, in the sense that we don't have knowledge in the HVAC and energy systems. So if we work with a company that's pioneered in that space, then we can just accelerate our growth and accelerate our innovation, because the time to act is yesterday. It's not 3 years from now. So I think what's important for us is not only do we have to start getting our clients in terms of robotics, we also have to think about how these systems can be deployed for the benefit of Canada as fast as possible. And I think these kind of strategic partnerships that we've worked on really, really help exemplify that.
We have talked about what Moduleaf is doing right now, but let's look ahead. What could this all mean for the future of farming, especially right here in Durham Region and in communities like Clarington? What kind of impact do you think indoor and automated farming could have on local food system, especially in terms of affordability, access, or resilience in the face of things like climate change or supply chain issues?
Our long-term goal as a company is to almost become the Amazon of food production. So in the sense that we have Amazon warehouses almost in every community in Canada, it seems, we're going to have similar, maybe not as large, but similar kind of facilities located in every community so that we can provide fresh foods locally to people of that region. And a lot of it is focused on having a variety of different crops available so that in the winter months, we're not competing with exports or not having to compete with exports to bring in fresh strawberries that, you get to the store, they're from Mexico, but half of them are still not even ripe because they have to harvest them so early and send them over. So I think not only are we going to solve the issue of affordable produce, but actually quality produce, because if we're producing for a local community, we can actually harvest when they're actually ripe and not when they're almost ripe, so that we're delivering tastier crops to people of the region at an affordable cost, and really support even like the food banks and other facilities that are struggling with keeping up with demands of the public. Food security is a huge issue, and we're seeing major increases in people using food banks, especially young families. So we're really hoping to stabilize that food supply so that we don't have to worry about people going hungry. And once we're able to do this in one community, we're able to move on to the next and slowly branch out these facilities and really develop that localized food production for these communities. So a lot of our thought process goes into how can we make this as friendly and useful to a community as possible without really taking away from the businesses of the existing farmers. Because the idea is not we're trying to replace all the farms that we have in Durham, but how can we work in tandem with these farmers that are interested in both indoor and external farms, traditional farms, that we can work together and really, really make it a better place for everyone.
Fast forwarding to 10 or 20 years, what does your dream version of farming looks like? What's changed in the way we grow, harvest, or even think about food?
I think with climate change kind of getting weirder and weirder every year, we see a lot of people pushing towards indoor farms just based out of the stability alone. That being said, I don't think indoor farms is 100% the solution, because think about like regions like Africa or regions that don't have as much resources to build large scale vertical farms or indoor farms. They still rely a lot on traditional outdoor farming, even if they take elements of indoor farming and apply it, such as grow towers and stuff that they're able to grow outside. So I think as we develop our food systems, it's going to look a little bit different depending on the regions that we see. Canada, might have a blend of external farms, and then in the winter, we rely solely on indoor farms. But that could eventually become, you have an orchard that's inside. So, apple farmers that were able to grow for most of the year outdoors, they have a segment that indoors they're still able to supply fresh produce. So it's hard to exactly say where it is, but it's evolving with every day. And I think ultimately I see a good blend of all of these different farming practices deployed so that we can not rely on, one versus the other. We have a stable and kind of cross-functional set of ways that we can produce food for our own communities. And I think as we build facilities that expand into the Asian markets, into the European markets, we'll see slight changes depending on the climate zones and stuff like that. But the idea stays the same, where we have this, multifaceted approach to delivering that stable food supply for consumers.
One thing that I've been hearing a lot these days is how tech might replace farming. I mean, it's already taking over other industries. Do you see this as a replacement or something that can work alongside and support more conventional ways of farming?
So I don't see it completely replacing traditional farming just because of the learning curve and the cost alone. But I do see it as a tool for accelerating or improving existing processes. So I think in a nutshell, again, the best is going to be a blend of different technologies, especially as new waves of farmers come in to replace the older generations that are retiring. We're going to see a lot of more tech focused solutions coming in, just because of that's kind of the way we think as a world now. Like, everything's computers, everything's connected to Wi-Fi. I think that's inevitable in the sense that we'll have tech integrated everywhere, but I don't think it'll completely replace this industry because we've been growing plants in the ground for millions of years as a species. But yeah, I think it'll, like every other industry, it will change, but I think more or less we'll still have the typical practices that we see in traditional farming.
And just one last question to wrap this whole segment. What advice would you give to young people interested in agri-tech, whether they are future farmers, engineers, or entrepreneurs?
It's a great question. I think it comes down to finding things that you're passionate about. So just to kind of go back to our origin story, we got started with Moduleaf because we were all passionate about gardening and kind of growing food at home. We never really thought we'd ever grow into a business where we were producing robots for farms around the regions and stuff like that. So it's hard to predict where you're going to be in the future. But once you start with something that's really appealing to you, it's really nice to kind of broaden your horizons and see exactly what it can apply to. So when I started with robotics, I thought of like industrial applications, so manufacturing and stuff like that, but it never really occurred to me that it could be used outdoor to pick strawberries. It could be used to move cars around in a parking garage. So I think it really comes down to just finding things that you're passionate about, being curious to learn about new industries, and bringing that kind of like entrepreneurship and innovation to these industries to fill those gaps that we see. So my biggest advice is just to be curious, always enjoy, always learn, and never stop learning. And you'll certainly start enjoying what you do and find something that really appeals to you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for sharing your vision. It's clear that the future of farming is smart, sustainable, and honestly kind of sci fi, but in a good way. And I'm looking forward to, not just me, but everyone, all of us are looking forward to seeing more such innovations on our farmlands so that our farmers get the help in the best way possible. Before we let you go, we have got a couple light-hearted questions and a little trivia to see how well you know the farmland. Let's have a bit of fun in our final segment. So here I'll ask you a series of questions and there will be like few rounds and you just have to answer them. The first round that we have is a farm fact trivia. It's all about Clarington. No pressures, it's just a fun little game.
Yeah, they might want to chase me with a pitchfork after about getting all these questions wrong, but we'll see.
No, they won't do that. Starting with Clarington is also known as the.
I'm gonna guess it's the apple, like the apple farm.
Yeah, that's apple capital of Canada. Name one animal that has rectangular pupils.
I know goats have them. I'm guessing sheep might have them too. Yeah.
Yes, so goat, sheep, horses, and deers, all of them have rectangular pupils.
Yeah, I actually didn't know horses had rectangular pupils. Huh. You learn something new every day.
The next one is how much of the world's food is still grown without any form of automation or digital tech? And even I don't know the answer, so even if you make a round guess, it's fine by me.
How much? Oh, the world's food?
Yes.
Oh, that's probably going to be above 80% for sure. I would probably say almost 85 to 90%. I feel like is still grown without, like, I'm guessing any form of technology or just like modern technology.
Yes, any form of technology, like you are manually doing everything, planting, harvesting, everything is done by hands and those old methods.
I would say, yeah, like a lot of probably lesser wealthy nations probably rely on mostly hand farming. So this could be, African countries or countries in Southern Asia. That might be around 60% with just hand labor. I would say as we get into machinery, we'll probably get up into like higher 80s. But production with fancy robotics and stuff like that's probably not very high. I would say probably less than 20% if I were to guess.
So when I was searching, there were sites that said 50, there were sites that said 60, some said 70, some said 80. So all kind of answers. But all in all, what I found was Around 50 to 70% of world's food is grown without any form of automation. So I think your answer is right. Rest we can leave this case to our listeners and they can tell us who's right. And I think it's kind of true that there are countries that don't have that much high tech farming tools. Like there are places, I am from India, so I can talk about India. There are places in India, there are farmers who don't have technical tools, and then there are farmers who have it. So I think there are all kind of farmers around the world, but majority slightly tilts towards people who don't have them. So that is it for this round. It's time for the next one. Time to switch the gears to some fast pace questions and some fast pace answers. It's time for the rapid fire. So our first one is favorite crop to work with
Strawberries are pretty tasty.
and most exciting agri-tech innovation right now.
Oh, that's a good one. I would say the one that we're working on right now with the kind of improved vertical farming is pretty exciting, but we're yet to see, that full scale production test. But I'm crossing my fingers that it'll be very, very profitable for farmers. So we'll go with that. Biased to the word to the answer.
Sensors or drones? What's more essential?
Sensor is probably more economical, so I'm going to go sensor, just based on a cost perspective.
Biggest myth about tech farming?
That the people building these farms know what they're doing in terms of a lot of them are tech people and not farmers. So I think when we build these facilities, we definitely need to involve the farmers so that we have their expertise. Because you can build a fancy vertical farm, but if you don't know how to farm, then the facility is not going to do well. And we saw that happen a lot in the States.
Tech hero, who inspires your innovation mindset?
That's a good question. I don't know. I have a lot of inspirations. I like, for example, Mark Rober does a really good job of building things, but showing them why they work and really educating the youth on getting involved in STEM and actually being excited about building things. So I would say Mark Rober is definitely one of my role models when it comes to this industry, not just because of the engineering standpoint. He got to work at NASA. That's really cool. But just from an education and spreading that knowledge point of view.
What's harder, building the tech or convincing the farmers to use it?
Convincing them to use it is pretty hard. I will admit. Maybe as like the newer generations of farmers come in, they're a little bit more lazy and they want to use tech to fill in for that gap. But I would say like old school traditional farming is hard to replace with tech.
The one farm job you secretly enjoy doing yourself.
I don't know. I'm not a big livestock farmer guy, so I'd probably have to do something with plants. I feel like picking like carrots. Like I feel like I'd secretly enjoy like picking all those rooted vegetables where it's like, just have the satisfaction of like getting a giant carrot pulled out of the ground. Maybe we'll go with that.
Would you rather invent a robot that milks cows or picks strawberries?
Probably strawberries. Yeah. I'm not a big livestock guy. I have a sensitive nose. I feel like you have to get used to the farm scents, and I think you have to work on a farm for a while before you become nose blind to those scents.
If you had to name a robot after a famous farmer or scientist, who would it be?
I would not be able to answer that question. I don't know. So I haven't thought about what I would name my robots, let alone after like a legacy or like farmer in the space. So maybe I'll think about that. That would probably be a good idea.
And this is it for this one. Time for the last and the final round, and it is a tongue twister. You have to say that 3 times, and the tongue twister is Clarington's cleverest coders coded a crop counting contraption.
I need to read this. I don't know if I'll be able.
That's fine.
If I can see it on paper, then I can see it. Clarington's cleverest coders coded a crop counting contraption. Clarington's cleverest coders coded a crop counting contraption. Clarington's cleverest coders coded a crop counting contraption.
The third one?
I have to do it again?
Yes.
Clarington's cleverest coders coded a crop counting contraption. There we go.
And this brings us to the end of today's episode. A big thanks to Nicholas for joining us today and giving us a glimpse into the future of farming. From vertical greens to autonomous robots, it's clear that the innovation is no longer just coming. It's already here. It's growing in our backyard. We have got more local stories, more voices, and more fields to walk through in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned, and if you haven't already, Hit the follow button wherever you're listening. Until next time, I'm Sanmeet Kaur and thanks for tuning in.